Hello, my name is Benjamin Lee, and I just want to welcome everyone. It is now 1 p.m., so we'll begin our presentation shortly. Today on January 25th, we'll have our presentation on mobile planning. There's an app for that. For help during today's webcast, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box found in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen, or call 1-800-263-6317. For content questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box, and we'll be able to answer those after the presentation. Here is a list of the sponsoring chapters, divisions, and universities. I would like to thank all of the participating chapters, divisions, and universities for making these webcasts possible. These are the list of upcoming webcasts. To register for these upcoming webcasts, please visit utahapa.org webcast and register for your webcast of choice. We're now offering distance education webcasts to help you get your ethics or law credits before the end of the year. These webcasts are available to view at utahapa.org webcast archive. To log your distance education CM credits, go to planning.org/CM, select Activities by Provider, select APA Ohio chapter, then select Distance Education and select your webcast of choice. Follow us on Twitter or like us on Facebook to receive up-to-date information on planning webcast series sponsored by chapters, divisions, and universities. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to planning.org/CM, select today's dates, select today's webcast. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credit. We're recording today's webcast, excuse me, and it will be available along with 6 slide per page PDF of the presentation. At this time, I would like to introduce the presenter for today, Dr. Jennifer Evans-Cowley.
Thanks so much. Many of you may have heard some of my webcasts and presentations in the past. I'm Jennifer Evans-Cowley. I'm a professor of city and regional planning at Ohio State University and serve as the Associate Dean for the College of Engineering here. I give an annual presentation called There's an App for That looks at the role of mobile planning and opportunities for planners to engage using mobile technology. So I'm really excited to share with you some of the latest and greatest mobile apps that are out there and how you can use them to advance your practice. So I want to kick off today's session by just telling you a little bit about what's happening with the growth of smartphone adoption and mobile technology. So globally, right now, 1 in 7 people are expected to own a smartphone by the end of the year, and that's expected to double by 2015. So if you think of the number of billions of people across the globe, we're seeing very, very high rates of adoption, even in developing countries. And within the United States, 46% of Americans own a smartphone based on a Pew Internet study last year. With more than 500,000 apps in the Apple Store, plus the number that are in Google and other app stores, it's a pretty amazing number. And studies by Nielsen show that the average smartphone user has 41 applications. So that's really quite a lot in terms of what's out there. And some app studies are showing that people are downloading an average of 11 apps per month, which is a pretty crazy number. And when we look at the top 10 most downloaded apps, it includes things like Fruit Ninja, but there are also lots of other apps that are out there that people are downloading that can be used for professional purposes as well. So I want to start off our webcast and just ask you whether or not you own a smartphone or a tablet. And so I'm just going to give you a few seconds. You can just click in and we're going to see how close you are. Last summer, I conducted a study along with one of my students, Brittany Kubinski, to look at the number of planners across the United States that own mobile devices such as smartphones or tablets. All right, so it looks like everybody has pretty well gotten a chance to vote, so we're going to go ahead and close the poll. And what we see is that 85% of those in our audience have a smartphone or a mobile device. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you how that compares with the survey results that we had. So we found that about 93% of our planners are using a smartphone or tablet, and that a significant number of those remaining are planning to purchase one. Okay, so the next question I want to ask you about is I want to know whether or not you're using your smartphone or tablet for work purposes. So we'll just see. We'll give you a few seconds to respond whether or not you're using that smartphone or a tablet that you own for your work purposes, or if it's just for your own personal purposes. Give everybody a few more seconds to respond. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the polls. And what we see is that 54% of you are, in fact, using your mobile devices for work purposes, and 36% of you said no, with 9% who are planning to do so in the future. So this should be a very helpful webcast for all of those of you who aren't using it, as well as those of you who are, in showing you some mobile applications that you can use that will be helpful in your own work. Now, the last question I want to ask is for those of you that are using your mobile devices for work purposes. Do you use any planning-specific mobile applications? So we're just going to find out yes or no. And if the answer is yes, if you can just type into the question box and give us an example of a mobile application that you're using that's planning-specific. We'll give everybody a few seconds to respond. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the polls. And what we see is that only very few of you, 9%, are using planning-specific mobile applications. And my goal is by the end of the day to get many, many more of you using mobile applications that can support your work in city planning. And I'm excited to see that about 30% of you would like to see planning applications. And we're going to talk about some things that people can use. And we've had a few people that have typed in and told us some applications that they're using that support their own work. So what we see is that some folks are using the APA application. If you haven't downloaded that, you can log CM credit and some other things. Corinne is using WalkScore, Matt is using Zillow and LoopNet, and then Ian's using a mobile GIS application. So those are all a few, some of the examples of things that people are using out there in terms of mobile applications. And what we're going to show you today is a whole lot more beyond just the APA mobile app, although that is one that you can use on a regular basis. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this one. And what I wanted to share with you is that planners across the nation, about 79% of them that we surveyed said they are in fact using their smartphone or tablet for work. But what's interesting is when I asked them what they're using their smartphone or tablet at work for, 92% of folks said that they were using it for social media applications. Now, I am taking that to mean that they have very active public engagement, particularly online through Facebook and Twitter, and that they're very excited to be able to use those in their work purposes. But most of us are using the standard note-taking applications and things like that. with a small number that are using planning-specific applications. And when we asked people what they were particularly looking for in terms of the development of applications that they could use for their work, they said they were very interested in mapping applications and they were very interested in public engagement applications. So I'm going to spend some time talking about those two, but I've also tried to think about what would be a typology for mobile applications that could be used in planning. And so I went out there, looked at all the apps I could come up with, and hopefully you'll introduce us to a few more. And if you come up with apps along the way, feel free to type those into our question box, and I'll share those with others. So the typology that I'm thinking of, and it's a work in progress, is that we have those that are just sharing information. So you can go to a mobile app and get something, some information. Then we have visualization apps. So those are things that you can see information. There are sensing apps, so those that are maybe location-specific or sensing information. There are predictive apps that are taking all kinds of data and then giving you predicted outcomes, and we'll talk about those some more. Apps that are focused on providing you with decision choices so that you can decide what action you want to take. There are crowdsourcing apps, so those that are encouraging participation and people to engage around some common purpose. And then there are what I will call engaging apps that are meant to engage you in a different way than many of the other apps are. So this is a work in progress, and I'm going to walk you through some examples of each type of mobile app. So the first one are information sharing apps. So this is just basic information sharing, but these are the ones that I found that have the best information that are useful for planners. So the first one is a new app. It's called America's Economy. Just came out a couple of months ago. This was created by the U.S. Census Bureau and Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what we found in using this one is the leading indicators. So for example, new residential home sales. They have all of this information. It's updated every time the new data comes out. They have it available at the regional level as well as the national level. And they have the data that's spread over, for example, a 24-month period. So we can see here the seasonally adjusted national unemployment rate over a 24-month period. We can see that that's going down. And we can also look at this information at a specific point in time if we wanted to. So this is the U.S. Census Bureau's first attempt at a mobile application. And what they're looking at and their next steps, so they are expecting to release more mobile applications, are ones that can sense your location and provide demographic information from a specific location. And I see that Andrew has just suggested that we have a Twitter tag for this webinar, and I'd be happy to support that. He has suggested the tag, "There's an app for that." And so I will, Ben, if you can type that, well, let's come up with a shorter tag. Andrew agrees that's too long. Ben, I'm going to have you send out via the chat box a Twitter tag for this, and I will let everybody know that at the end of today's lecture, then I will be sending out via email about an hour afterwards a link to all of the mobile applications that I'm talking about that will be posted on my blog. So we'll have more information to come to make these as accessible as possible. So Ben, thanks for giving us a Twitter tag that we can use, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so the America's Economy app just out, and look for more from the Census Bureau. So I found this to be reasonably accessible. I really like the visuals in it, but the information is somewhat limited for what we use as planners on a day-to-day basis, but some good information in there. Another information sharing app, Singapore decided to put its entire master plan for up on an app. And so you can look at the whole master plan. Imagine putting your comp plan in an app. You can look at the building height plans, overlays, land use, all kinds of information. So this is the only master plan that I'm aware of that has been put in mobile app form. So I thought that one was an interesting one. Another one, information sharing. Victoria, Australia has a mobile application that they've put together that allows you to zoom in, pick a particular location. For example, if we wanted to look at information on 49 Smith Street, then you would just pick your location and then click the My Reports, and it will automatically generate a PDF that will be emailed to you that has everything that you would want in a planning report. So it gives you the zoning information, it gives you the lot information, all the sorts of things that people call our planning offices requesting. It's right there in PDF format, already gets automatically generated and emailed to you. So I thought this was a really customer service focused application that makes it very easy for users to be able to obtain information about planning and zoning issues. For the apps, so some of these, Doug has been asking whether or not they're available for iPhone, Android, etc. Most of these are available for iPhone. Some of them are exclusive to Android. Some of them are available in multiple platforms. And so I will include that information in the blog post so that you have information on whether they're for Android, iPhone, or other platform. Okay, and then there are iPad applications that are out there. One has been developed in Abu Dhabi, and this was generated for their planning staff. So what they wanted was something that would have the very specific information that they have in their own in-house office, so including spatial information, databases, other kinds of information. So they packaged it all up into an app that is specific to Abu Dhabi and is intended for their planning staff. So when they go out in the field, that they have all the information they need to know when they get to a site to be able to look at and analyze. Now, this is certainly something that would be resource and financially intensive to develop something very specific to your own planning staff, but I thought this was a really unique way of sharing information in between staff. It's not something that you can go out and download. It was specifically developed for their staff. Now, Francis has asked whether or not these apps are free. The vast majority of these apps are free. A handful of them are available for 99 cents. I only have one app that I'll be profiling later that's expensive, and so if I do have I will tell you the price of that one when we get to it, but the vast majority of these are free or very nominal cost. I'm not going to answer all the questions, but I do have the questions that are coming up in the feed, and so if there's one that seems really to stick out, then I'll answer those as I'll go along. Okay, so I want to move on and talk about visualization apps. Visualization is all over the place. You hear a lot of people talking about it, and it's really about ways for us to convey information in easy to understand and digest ways. So I'm just going to highlight two apps that achieve this. One of them is called Stats of the Union. It's a free app. It was developed by General Electric. And General Electric has a huge healthcare division where they make medical devices. And they developed Stats of the Union as just an infographic kind of way to convey health statistics and demographics. So by county, what you can view in this case is London County, Virginia. You can see the portion of the population that's below the poverty level, under age 19, and births, deaths, at-risk groups, diseases, risk factors. And so what it does is it takes publicly available information, combines it, puts it together, and conveys it in a visually interesting way. Another one that I think is really interesting, Parsons Brinkerhoff developed this free app called Bay Bridge Explorer. And what they did is they took the 3D fly-through that we see developed in some of our planning projects, and they packaged it up into an app. So when you download this app, then you can zoom through, back up, explore, spin around, and generally just look at the whole San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge project and see what's planned. This is the first one that I've seen that takes that visualization fly-through kind of thing and packages it into a mobile application. So I think this one's an interesting one to see for planners because we do a lot of visualization in our work. And those are just some of the views that you can see from inside that visualization app. Okay, I'm going to move on and talk about sensing apps. And these are ones that can sense your location or sense other kinds of data. And I'll just share a few examples of those. So Sitegeist is a new app that's just come out, And it was developed for the purpose of being able to see where you're located and then tell you the demographics of that particular location. So for example, I can know that the median age in my neighborhood is 38 years. I can see the age distribution. I can see the political contributions that have been made for the various parties. And it also provides information such as popular Foursquare check-in locations. And so basically what it takes is some of the social media data combined with publicly available data, mashes it all up and gives you a profile of what's going on in your particular neighborhood. The challenge of this particular app is that you can't go from neighborhood to neighborhood. It's specific to wherever you're physically located. So it's great if you're in a particular neighborhood and want to know what's going on there. Not so great if you're trying to find out information about an adjacent area. Walk Safe, this is an Android application. This one in particular is, I'd say it's an early prototype. I'm sure there's opportunities for it to get better. But one of the problems that we see with mobile devices is that people are often cases texting while walking and not looking up when they cross the street. So this is certainly not safe. I will talk about this behavior a little bit later in another example. But this mobile application has been developed so that when you're crossing the street, that it is sensing whether or not there's a car coming and will notify you through vibration or noise that there's a car coming and you should look up. Now, I should hope that we all remember what we learned in kindergarten, that we should look both ways before crossing the street and not text while walking. But this app is intended to make it safer to engage in unsafe activity. Okay, the next app is called Street Bump. This one is from Boston. And what Street Bump does is it operates in the background while your phone is working. And what it will do is sense whether or not you've gone over a pothole. And if it senses that you've gone over a pothole, it will send that information to the city of Boston. And Boston will use that information and deploy its street crews to go out and repair potholes. So in effect, it's a way to crowdsource and get information from the various people who are driving all over the city of Boston to make improvements in the street system. So the hope is that it will save money by allowing street crews to get to potholes more quickly and have an easier way for them to figure out where the potholes are before they get out of control. So I thought this was a really interesting sensing app that just runs in the background. You don't have to do anything, although you can choose to report a pothole if you want to. There's a similar pothole radar detector that's intended for bicyclists. This one's out of Canada. It also operates in a number of U.S. cities. And what happens is you're riding your bicycle and you're on your way, on your commute, wherever you're going. And what will happen is that it will send data if it senses that there's a pothole, but it will also beep at you if there is a pothole ahead, trying to get you to avoid that particular location. So I thought that one's an interesting one that's trying to help our cyclists avoid potholes. So those are just a few examples of some of these sensing apps. The next set of apps I want to talk about are predictive. And I think this is really where you're going to see a lot more development activity is around sophisticated predictive apps. Tiramisu is in Pittsburgh. This is for their transit system, and this was developed by Carnegie Mellon University. And so what it does is it takes information about historical ridership and combines it with user reports so that people can report in real time what's happening, and then will tell you information about what's likely to happen with upcoming buses. So for example, if I want to take the closest bus stop, it tells me that it's 4 minutes. It's a 4-minute walk, and tells me that what the number of estimated seats are, if there's few seats or more seats, and whether or not that's based on rider real-time prediction or rider historical estimates, and based on whether or not the bus is running on time, whether that's agency schedule or crowdsourced information about how the bus is running. So I think this is an example. It's a good experiment. I think that we will see more of this kind of information in our public transit applications. Most of them right now will tell you, hey, here's the when the bus is coming, but doesn't tell you information, for example, the bus is full or other kinds of information. So I think that we'll see more of this type of app coming out. CycleTracks is a great app. This one's for bicyclists, was developed by San Francisco County. And San Francisco County was trying to figure out a better way to do their modeling for bicycle infrastructure as part of their transportation planning. And so what they were able to do was develop a great app that would be highly useful to riders. So what it does is it tracks how far you've gone, your estimated speeds, all of that information, which is information riders want anyway. And it's mapping their exact location of where they're traveling to. And then at the very end, once they finish their ride, it just asks them one quick question. What was the purpose of the trip? Social, exercise, work, shopping, whatever it might be. And then all that information is fed directly to the city, or to the County of San Francisco. San Francisco then used all of that data in developing their model to figure out where they should be investing in cycling infrastructure. What are the routes that people are most likely to take? And where should they be looking at putting, for example, bicycle lane striping or other kinds of things? And this has been so successful in terms of their modeling that they now allow other communities to use the CycleTracks app, and they will send them the data. And so some cities have developed their own version of the app, and others are using San Francisco County as the mechanism to collect this data and then send it to them so that they can use it in their transportation planning. INREX is a company that is responsible for tons and tons of GPS data for traffic purposes. And so what they do is they track traffic through a whole series of sensors and other things, and then they feed that data back to state transportation agencies, to your GPS in your car, and all kinds of other users. And what they've done is created a mobile app called INREX, Never Be Late Again. And so what this app does is it takes historical data in 1- and 5-minute increments, as well as real-time data, combines it all together, and then gives you predictions for different times of day that you might leave. Okay, so for example, this is a map that shows 2 alternative routes for how I could get from where I'm at right now at work to my home. And it tells me that if I leave right now, which when I took this snapshot was at 9:15 in the morning, that it would take me 9 minutes to get there on one route and 10 minutes to get there on another route to get the 3.2 miles, and it indicates green that it's free flowing. But I can also look and slide down and say, what is it likely to be like at 5 o'clock? How long is it likely to take me then? And good for me, only 11 minutes. So my commute time is quite easy. But it provides alternative routes, it tracks construction, it tracks accidents, all kinds of other information. And so I think this is the most comprehensive traffic app that I have found that's out there. So it just uses tons and tons of data. It covers the entire United States as well as 30 other countries. And so anybody can use this app. Okay. Then we have a series of apps that are designed to help in decision making. Okay, so that last app was an example of one that is both predictive as well as attempting to help you in making decisions. The first app I want to highlight is called SF Park. This is San Francisco parking. It applies to all their parking meters. And they have price-sensitive parking. So when the parking demand is extremely high, the prices are more expensive. And this app is intended to show you where there's high availability and low availability. So for example, if we look here right in front of the San Francisco court, there's very low availability at this time, 3:06 p.m. But what we can see is that directly one block over in a couple of directions and one block this way, that there's very high availability. And so you could pay less money to walk a short distance, or you could pay more money and have a hard time finding a parking space. And so this is an app that adjusts all day long because it's tied to the parking meters, so the parking meters know if they're full or not, and uses real-time data to help users be able to find based on availability or based on price. And so I think this is a really interesting application that is intended to guide users and help them, instead of circling around the same block looking for parking spaces, to be able to find information quickly and make a decision quickly about where they should park. Park PGH, this is for Pittsburgh. Another example, this one shows you how many parking spaces are available in parking garages around the convention center. This is just an easy one, a simpler one, available, approaching capacity, near capacity, and how many spaces are open in those parking garages. Zoner is a Android application that is based on the City of New York zoning code but could be applied anywhere. So what it does is it takes the zoning code for the City of New York, you pick your location, and if you have a particular site in New York, then it will automatically fill in the lot width, length, zoning code, and floor height, and it will calculate the maximum floor area ratio that you can have. So what's the maximum building area? So I'm not saying that the maximum building area is the right information that you necessarily want, but it's a very quick way for developers, architects, and others to get some information on the maximum height of a building, getting information on the maximum floor area that can be built, that sort of thing. Okay. I'm going to touch on some crowdsourcing applications. So these are intended to bring people together to talk about and engage together around a particular issue. So I have a couple of different apps I want to highlight. Park Circa. So I just talked about some of the parking applications in San Francisco and Pittsburgh that are providing information on where parking is available. And this was public parking focused. Well, in highly congested areas, well, and in fact in all areas, we have a highly underutilized resource, and that is private parking. So for example, my driveway. I'm at work right now. I'm not using my driveway. And so what Park Circa does, it works in San Francisco and a number of other major cities, is that it connects private users who have garages or other garages, driveways, whatever parking they have available, that they can put out online and say, here's the price that you need to pay if you want to park in my driveway. So for example, if I'm in downtown San Francisco and 15 Oak looks like it would be convenient, I can pay $10 flat rate and park there all day. And this app is set up so that you can simply pay the, check in, you pay, it pulls money from your account, transfers it to another account. So this is a way that private users can get together and decide to use a parking asset that they have and earn money. OpenTreeMap is more in line with, I think, things that many of us would like to see. This is available in a number of cities, including Philadelphia, Grand Rapids, and at least one other city. And what this does is it allows people to enter information, take pictures, and document the tree canopy in their community. And so I thought this was a really interesting way to encourage users to share. San Diego's the other city I was thinking of. And so the public can enter information about the trees in their community, and it's creating this rich database of people who are interested in the tree canopy and sharing information. Okay, I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about engaging apps. And so there's two examples that I want to highlight. One of them is an app called Visit Baltimore, and this was developed by the Tourism Bureau. And what we have is we have augmented reality. So what you do is you hold up your mobile phone and you can point it in any direction you want, and then it will tell you what is ahead. So for example, I can see that the American Visionary Art Museum is just 0.7 miles ahead in that direction. And if I click on any of those boxes, then it's going to pull up information from the Convention and Tourism Bureau and share information about what's there, hours of operations, all those kinds of things that could be put in place. So I think this is a really great one for tourists. We're wandering around and we don't know what's nearby, and a fun and engaging way to see what's all around us. And another one that I thought was particularly fun, this is a public plaza. This is in Spain. And what the city did was they created a public plaza screen, and you see that it looks like a video game. And what it does is that it senses that you have your cell phone. You just use the light in your cell phone. So when you turn your cell phone on, then the screen lights up. And what it does is it plays music, and these little monsters cover the screen. And what people do is they walk around the plaza with their phone, waving it, and trying to get the monsters to disappear. So you can see, for example, this person right here is swiping their phone this way and eating the monsters. And so what happens is that it completely activates this plaza at night. All of these people who don't know each other are active on the plaza playing this video game as a group with their cell phones. And I just thought, what a fun way to activate a space. Most all of us are carrying around our mobile phones, and what a fun way to make a space engaging with something people are carrying around with them. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that when we did our survey, we found that the apps that people were most interested in, our planners were most interested in, were apps that were going to be mapping related and apps that would be engagement related. So I looked around and I said, what apps are out there that I might be able to experiment? And so this fall I had a studio class here at Ohio State University, and what we did is we got iPads and we downloaded some apps for those iPads. They could also be downloaded for a phone, and said, what can we do with these and how can we use these in our planning process to ease data collection, make public engagement easier, and make our analysis easier. So I'm going to share just a handful of apps that we used and how we used those. The first app we used is called GIS Pro. This is the one that is expensive. So there's two versions of it. One is a $99 version, and the other is a $299 version of it. And the difference is the degree of sophistication that you can have. It is tied to a variety of open map systems and allows you to be able to create layers just like you would in any GIS application you might have on your desktop. And it also allows you to tie in other kinds of information. And so I'll show you what I'm talking about there in a minute as I get into the example of how we used it. We also use Dropbox, just a free application so that we can do file sharing. We used some of the apps that already came on our mobile devices, so we used just the Internet app, and we used the camera and photo apps in the mobile devices. And then we purchased, this costs anywhere from $50 to $100 depending on the brand that you would get. This is a GPS device that we could just slap on the back of a phone or an iPad that would allow us to capture GPS positioning while being in the field without having Wi-Fi connectivity. And so what we did with this is we did a number of transportation planning activities. The first thing that we wanted to do was we were focusing on the university. We had a tragic traffic accident that happened on the campus where a student was very seriously injured, and the university was very concerned about pedestrian, jaywalking activities and other kinds of interactions between bicyclists, pedestrian, and motorists. And so they asked us to take a look and see what were the issues that were going on relative to mobility between these three modes. So what we did is the first activity is that we stalked people. We took our iPads and using the GIS Pro app, what we would do is just track people and where they were moving through campus, tracking point by point their exact location and the route that they were choosing to take. And that way we could just see where were people jaywalking, where were people making their route choices, were they walking through grass, staying on sidewalks, those kinds of things. And then we're also, in this GIS Pro app, able to capture pictures of different locations, and then we can add descriptions. And so, for example, in this case, we typed in bikes chained to trees and captured that as a picture. We were able to document, for example, here's somebody that is jaywalking across a street. We were able to capture things like this person was legally walking their bike on a sidewalk where another person was illegally riding on the sidewalk, and capturing the locations where those things were happening. And then what we were able to do is, this is, for example, one of the route maps. So people were, the person was following people all over campus and tracking each one of these routes. And you can imagine, this starts to add up if you're tracking and stalking people all over the place. And then this data can very easily be exported into an Excel format, into a shapefile, a Google Earth file, whatever you want to export it as, which made it very easy for us to then take it into a desktop GIS application and be able to do further analysis. We also did the same thing with cyclists. In this case, every green bicycle represents 10 bicyclists that were cycling legally, and the red bicyclists are 10 bicyclists that are illegally riding on sidewalks. So it allowed us to see where there were concentrations of legal and illegal bicycling activity. And then what we wanted to do was survey people that were riding bicyclists to better understand cycling behavior. So we asked them a series of questions as they were parking their bicycles at different bike stations, and asking them where they enter and leave the campus, the number of days they ride, how often they find sufficient bicycle parking, do they feel comfortable using the shared bike vehicle lanes. And what we found through this survey is that in certain locations, our cyclists on campus felt that there was no way they could get to their destination without riding on sidewalks, and they felt that riding on sidewalks was safer than riding on the roadways. So there was a lot of really good, rich information that we were able to capture and make that spatially tied data. And then what we were able to do is go through a series of activities where we could test different possibilities. For example, testing through the use of signage, seeing if people look both ways if we put signage, both on the form of a sign or putting it into the pavement. We added these look signs to see what would happen if people would actually look both ways. And again, testing it at different locations so we could compare what happens, and then just using the mobile app to be able to capture some of those results. So that's just a quick summary of what we did in this particular project. It was very easy using the GIS Pro application. It had everything we needed to be successful. It is not the only GIS app out there. There's tons of others that you might choose from. We just happened to choose that particular one based on the kinds of characteristics that we were looking for. So what's the future of mobile applications look like? So when I think about the future, I think that the initial apps that we saw tended to be very information driven. But what I think we're going to see more of is collaborative ones. So for example, Open Plans is an organization that works on mobile application and web application development. They're working on a project called Shareabouts, and the idea of Shareabouts is that you would be able to locate on a map and put your ideas down. So if you were working on, for example, a neighborhood planning project and you wanted to engage with the community, they could say, put this red dot down, and then they could type in their idea for what they would like to see at that location. Apps competitions are all the rage. Most of the major cities around the country offer these apps challenges. They have prizes, and what they're focused on is using open data, and I'll say that's a really critical point, that as planners we don't necessarily need to develop the apps, but we have to provide the data for which private developers can use and then develop applications that would be helpful. And that's what these apps challenges really hope to achieve, is using open data and encouraging the application community to develop useful applications. And then Code for America, most of you have probably heard of Code for America. They do all kinds of innovative and creative work. For example, there's an application that has been developed called I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's about blight, and it's in New Orleans. And what they've done is it allows you to look at particular locations and then get the status of what's happening relative to code enforcement and renovation. So it pulls from the code enforcement and building permit data so that you can see what the status of a blighted property is. And there are all kinds of other apps that are being developed. They work in different cities across the country and just do all kinds of interesting work. And then this last project that I want to highlight is called Local Data. The idea is to create a digital toolkit for communities, and they're trying to work with city agencies, community groups, nonprofits, and the whole goal is to take spatial data and map local assets and just collect as much data as we can, make it available and out there so that people can instantly visualize that and instantly use that information. So I think there's a lot of different activities that are out there that are resulting in some interesting information. If I compare this, when I first did this presentation 2 years ago, I think I had 5 apps that I could talk about. And then last year I had about 12 apps that I could talk about. And I'm not sure how many I covered this year, but it's a lot more. And I expect that by next year I'll have twice as many applications to talk about, and many of them much more sophisticated than what I was able to talk about from a just pure information sharing perspective. So the last thing that I want to touch on is I will put in a little plug. So one of the things that I've been working on is around distance education. Many of you may know that I was the founder of this webcast series 3.5 years ago. And some of you may have also heard about massive open online courses. Massive open online courses are an intent to open education to a global audience. So there are a number of different organizations out there that are offering massive open online courses, including Coursera, Udacity, edX, and universities across the country are signing on to these services to be able to provide free open education. So myself and a colleague, Tom Sanchez, who's a professor of planning at Virginia Tech, and I decided that we wanted to offer a massive open online course. So what we did was we have created Technicity. It's going to be offered this May. We are offering it for 15 hours of CM credit, and it will be offered throughout the month of May. And we already have 7,000 people that have signed up for this course. And we have a global audience from 60 different countries that have signed on so far. And what we're hoping to be able to cover is to spend 4 weeks really focusing on how technology can shape the city. So we've just spent the last 45 minutes or so talking about mobile applications, but there's so much more out there related to technology in cities. So this is just a snapshot of where people across the globe are that have signed up for this course. And they're from cities of every size that you can imagine. And what's most interesting to me is we've asked how they plan on accessing the course. And 30% of our participants are planning on accessing the course from their mobile device, with 16% planning to participate in the course via mobile phone. So that's a really interesting challenge as we think about educating in our community, whether that be educating the public about a planning project or me educating you about what's happening, the latest things in the planning field. But I think it's a really rich opportunity, and this course should be a lot of fun for us to think about innovative ways that we can use technology. So we're going to spend time talking about platforms for engagement, tools for analysis, the infrastructure for sensors and networks that are shaping our cities, and then spend some time about open data initiatives, hackathons, and urban prototyping festivals. So we're really excited about this. If you would like to sign up for the course, it's totally free and is available for CM credits. And that kind of wraps up my presentation. We have a ton of questions. And so what we're going to do is I'll just start going through those. And we'll just get through as many of these questions as we can and try to have as much dialogue as possible. But the first thing that I would like to do is I've got 2 more little poll questions that I'd like to ask you. The first one, I'd like to know, are you using any of the apps that I described? So we covered a whole lot of apps in a really short period of time, so I'm just curious if you have used any of these mobile apps. So I'll give everybody a few seconds to respond. Okay, so what we see is that 17% of you have used one or two of the apps, and I'd be very curious which apps you have used. So if you don't mind typing into the questions box which apps that I covered that you have used in the past. And I'm really also pleased to see that I was able to introduce to 82% of you a whole series of apps that you hadn't seen before. And the last poll question I have for you is, did you see one or more apps that you'll plan to use? So I'll give everybody a chance to see those. Okay, so Nicholas has been using Zeitgeist. Molly has been using the INREX app. Karen's been using America's Economy. Alan and Andrea have been using Dropbox. Nishant also using INREX. Zeitgeist, Kristen's been using. So there are a couple of them that you have been using, and a number of others responded about America's Economy and Dropbox. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And what we see is that 70% of you found an app that you think you're going to use in the future, so that's great, and 25% not sure. And that's totally fair. You need to check out some of those apps in more detail to figure out if they're going to be helpful for you. Okay, so what we're going to do now, feel free to type in more questions. We'll try to get through as many of these as we can, and happy to answer the questions you may have. So I'm going to back up in the questions. We had a bunch that came in, and let's see. So what are some examples of more successful crowdsourcing apps that are being used by planners? Well, I will back it out and not say planners specifically, but crowdsourcing apps. I think the most popular crowdsourcing app that would apply to what we do in planning is SeeClickFix. So I am just going to pull up on the web, and I will show you SeeClickFix. So SeeClickFix is a web-based application, but it also has information and a mobile app. And so the way that it works is that you can just report an issue. So for example, if there's a pothole or if there's a noise problem or whatever the thing might be, the goal is to enter it and hopefully get it fixed. Now, some of these things the city will monitor, so it works similar to a 311 system, and in fact, many cities have adopted SeeClickFix as their 311 system as a way to capture that information and then be able to respond to public requests. But in many cases, it's really just about community. For example, somebody found a possum and in their trash can, and they weren't sure if it was dead or not. So the neighbor walked over, looked in the trash can, and shook the trash can, found out it was alive, and so he tipped the trash can over. The possum ran away. He took a picture of it, and he posted on SeeClickFix, problem solved. Okay. Another person lost a mitten, and a neighbor found it, returned it. It was a treasured mitten, and the mittens were reunited. So, you know, it handles very small things to much bigger things, such as there had been a power problem that had electrified the sidewalk, and so people walking on it couldn't tell, but if a dog or another animal stepped on it, then they got shocked. And so that's an example of something that was quite serious, and the city was able to immediately deploy their power crew, get the power crews and utility crews out to solve that problem. So I think SeeClickFix is a great example of one that is very popular on the crowdsourcing front. Okay. The next question, I'd be interested in knowing whether places like Singapore or elsewhere actually release the raw data, so the parcel level zoning, for third parties to build visualizations rather than releasing the data through apps and maps developed themselves. And the answer is absolutely. If you look at open data initiatives in Seattle, San Francisco, all of the major cities have these open data initiatives, and if you go on their website, then you can find what information is being released. In some cases, that includes parcel-level zoning data. It includes, for example, building permits, plat requests, rezonings. There's all kinds of information that's being released. The degree to which an app developer chooses to use that to develop apps is variable from community to community. One of the key hurdles for cities is the format and usability of the data that we are releasing. So if you think about, for example, your own zoning database, you keep that in a very specific format. That format may be virtually unusable to an app developer, or it may be quite usable. And so one of the things that IT professionals in our cities and the development community are working on are open data protocols to be able to make sure that data that is being released through these open data initiatives is in the best and most usable format possible. Now, some cities are providing real-time data as well. So, for example, I believe it's Chicago, that they release all of their 911 reports within 3 minutes. So they're not necessarily releasing the detail of who reported or things like that, but they're releasing data that an incident of this type has been reported at this location. So you can, there are apps that have been developed that let you see real-time crime basically as it's happening in your community. And it will, apps that have been developed that will send you a notification, so your phone will beep if there's a crime nearby. So there's all kinds of different creative ways that our application community has been working to use the open data that we're developing. Within the planning profession, I don't know that we've had a whole lot of dialogue about what data would be most useful to release and getting people on board with releasing that, nor working really closely with our IT professionals to help figure out the way to format that data so that it has the highest value use. Okay, next question is, do you have a fix on how much data these apps use if you don't have an unlimited data plan? Okay, so that's a great question. This is highly variable. So what I will say is that the sensing applications, so for example, the safe walk that's running in the background or the pothole examples, anything that's running in the background all the time is going to A, use a lot of power, and B, if it's sending and transmitting information, then it is using your data service. So if you don't have an unlimited data plan, that may be a concern. For me, it's less about the data plan and more about the power in my phone, because the battery life on most of our mobile phones is not what we would like it to be. So that is an issue, and so if you're going to have multiple apps that are running in the background all the time, then that's a problem. But for most of the other apps that I talked about, that they may have sensing in them, but they're only sensing when you're actively using it. So for example, Facebook. If you go into the Facebook app and start using it and you allow it to sense your location, then it will be using that for a short period of time, but it's not sucking up your whole data plan. Okay. All right, another question. Do any of the apps incorporate FaceTime? I'm not familiar with any app that is specific to a FaceTime type thing. Of course, you know, there's Skype apps and FaceTime and other things, but I'm not familiar with apps that are incorporating those features that would be applicable to planning, but perhaps others do know, and I'd be happy to have you share that. Alex wants to share that the city of Atlanta has an app that's similar to CycleTracks. There are a number of cities that have done this. For example, College Station, Texas is one, and there are a host of other cities that have been using apps similar to CycleTracks, so that's great to hear that Atlanta is part of that as well. Okay, so a good question. Many of these apps tap into census data, ACS data. How accurate are the apps in rural areas? And where may be accuracy problems with ACS? So what I would say is this is a problem that is far larger than ACS. Many of these apps are using all kinds of data sources, or they're using hybrids of data sources. So I think it's a really great question about the degree of accuracy with any of these apps in terms of the data that you're getting. Now, in part, this is being resolved with more of these open data initiatives. So, for example, the census releasing their data for the purposes of mobile application development. But I agree there are certainly data problems, and anytime we use a mobile application, we need to consider the source of the data and the accuracy of that source. Okay, so Janice has a question about some of the apps that I mentioned. San Francisco Park seems to be a terribly dangerous, perhaps even more so than the artificial security obtained from the WalkSafe app. Have you heard any feedback from police departments about apps that people must interact with during the parking circling process? Okay, so this is a great question. So what I would hope that one would do is before you leave for your destination, that you would use an app like the NREX app or the San Francisco Park app or any of these to see so that you could target a particular destination or a route. So rather than doing that while you're in traffic. But what I will say is that the incidence of texting and using mobile applications while driving is ridiculous. And actually, it's worse with pedestrians. The accident incident rate for pedestrians has grown like fourfold over what it is for drivers as the result of using mobile phones. And so it is really a significant public health hazard. So while these apps are extremely helpful and useful, people have to be smart about how and when they're using them. So, you know, I think that's in part a public education campaign. I don't have specific data from police departments, but one of my colleagues has done studies on people who are texting or using the phone while walking, and what he has done is analyzed emergency room data from pedestrians and the reasons and the accidents they had. So people routinely fall into manholes because that were open because they were texting while walking or using a mobile app. There are people who walk right into open car doors, right into traffic and get hit by cars, all kinds of things, because I think that people perceive that they can see and hear and observe more than they actually can when they're using these mobile devices. There was a psychology professor at a university who did a study where he had a clown that was jumping up and down and moving across a plaza. And as people moved across the plaza, when they got to the end of the plaza, they were asked whether or not they noticed the clown. And the clown was totally obvious. For the people who were not on the phone or who were not using a mobile device, 95% of them saw the clown. If people were talking on the phone, only like, I don't know, a third of them saw the clown. And for those that were texting or using their mobile device in another, through their fingers, only like 25% of them saw the clown. So the level of awareness is really low. So that's something we do, even as planners, we have to be cautious about when we're using our mobile devices. Okay, are there apps place-specific, or can these be used to develop information in other communities, like the tree canopy one? So the great thing about the tree canopy one, this is a question from Stephanie, and I'll just go ahead and pull up OpenTreeMap. The OpenTreeMap, what they have done is they have provided the mobile code so that you can download it, use it, and what it does is it gives you a platform in which you can integrate your own information for your own community. So that's why we have several different cities that have adopted this. So Philadelphia, we have the Green Print maps, Urban Forest map, San Diego Tree Map, Grand Rapids. So it's an open source. They have project partners. You can and funding from USDA and others. There is contact information at the opentreemap.github.com, and I will have a link to this that will be on the blog that you'll be getting, blog post you'll be getting later after our webcast, so that you can learn more information about how to utilize the OpenTreeMap app. Okay, Armando wants to know, are there any city zoning restrictions that apply to allowing others to park in your driveway for a fee? Well, I guess that's a question I would ask to all of our land use experts out there. I think that that would probably vary from community to community. I would hope that I would be able to allow people to park in my driveway, if not, not for a fee. But you see this all the time. Popular sporting events, things like that, people have their signs out that say $20 park here and give up their parking spaces. The degree to which that's legal, I've never really thought about that. So maybe our land use experts out there have better ideas about the legality of something like that. Hadrian mentions the same thing, worrying that park circa could be viewed as an illegal and unzoned business activity in a residential neighborhood. So we'll leave it to our zoning experts to resolve that. Okay, so Rick wants to know about the equity for those who do not have or cannot afford smartphones. So one of the really interesting things that the data that we have found from the Pew Internet project, they do a lot of studies around equity and access to smartphones. And what they have found is that the rate of adoption for households who make less than $30,000 a year is actually extremely high, and that for low-income households at this point they're more likely to have internet access via a smartphone than landline or a land-based access. So within their household, the smartphone is likely to be the source of internet access rather than through their computer. Or phone service or other things. So that's something certainly we're following, and there are good groups out there that are paying attention to this, but it is interesting to know that smartphones seem to be the way that more people, low-income households, are getting access to the internet. Okay. All right. A couple people want to know the name of the GPS device that I showed, and let's see, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I will post it up on the blog and find the answer to that. But it doesn't have to be that device, it can be anyone. If you just Google GPS devices, then there are a whole wide series that are out there. The pricing is fairly affordable. You certainly can find them for under $100. Okay, Holly wants to know, are you aware of any apps that would be good for tracking the use of public space? For example, to be able to see whether there are any tennis courts available at the park. That's a great question. So the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Boston is currently in the process of developing a mobile application for the regional's park systems. And they are tracking all kinds of information. And so I think one of the things that you're going to be able to see is information of this type about the availability of tennis courts and other kinds of things. I'm not positive about the degree of specificity, but if you go to the Boston Regional MPO, they probably have information about their green space project, an app that they're developing. So that would be the first place that I'd point you in terms of looking for that is an app to come. Okay. All right, so where does the data come from for apps? For example, NREX, who input that data. Is it real-time, historically based, over time, based on traffic counts, etc.? Okay, so this is highly variable from app to app, and in many cases you can read in the app description, it will tell you the source of the data. And this is particularly important if you're looking to rely on this for some purpose. So for example, the America's Economy app that I highlighted, when you look at that web page, it tells you in detail the exact sources that that data is coming from. But since it's developed by the Census Bureau, then it's a reliable source of data. NREX is probably a company that you all have never, ever heard of. I will go to NREX. They are kind of the company that collects all the traffic data. So what they do is they're, as it says on their website, they're the leading provider of traffic information, directions, and driver services, as well as apps and tools designed to get your traffic-powered solutions. So what they're able to do, and in fact I have a presentation from INREX that they sent me, and it has a picture of where they get all their data. Okay, so I will show you that slide. So this is the INREX Smart Driver Network. So this is how they get all their data. So they have these GPS vehicle probes. They have mobile and smartphone probes. So for example, when you have the INREX app, then you're volunteering information on traffic conditions. They have road sensors, traffic cameras, and driver-generated reports. So people will crowdsource and volunteer information on accidents. And so they have an enormous network of data. So for example, this is their coverage in the United States. So this is the average speed on 950,000 miles of roadway. And so you can see that in many areas the traffic speeds are quite high. You can see in urban areas that it starts to get red and yellow. So this is their coverage. They have a massive amount of data. And what they do is they sell this data to transportation agencies. And so that's their part of their business model. They also sell it to automobile manufacturers, to when you have your GPS device in your car, it's all fed by what INREX does. So that's where they get their data. So the INREX app is highly reliable just because they have this extremely extensive set of data source. There are, of course, other traffic apps out there. I'm not promoting this one per se. I will just say this one has an extremely significant database that has real-time traffic conditions as well as historical traffic conditions. Okay. All right, Mary would like to do walking tours with smartphones. Are there any existing apps that you're aware of that do this? And yes, the answer is absolutely. In the city of Columbus, we have an app that's for our city. And that app includes our 311 reporting, our 311 system where you can report problems. It also includes information on upcoming events and all kinds of other things. But the cool part is that it has walking tours. And so you just pull up, it gives you a route to follow, and it has information along the way. And they have art tours so that you can do a walking art tour and other kinds of things. And this has been developed by our public health department as a way to encourage people to get out and walk around Columbus. I'm not aware of other apps that do that, although I have heard of proposals, but maybe some other people out there would like to share if they have examples of these apps for walking tours. Okay, the next question. Let's see. Are there apps that can be used to collect public input and comments at public meetings? There are a couple that have been developed that are kind of prototype examples. Place Matters is an organization that has been experimenting with this kind of technology. And they have developed a number of different kinds of prototypes that they're experimenting with. I don't have an app that I can point you to that you can download today. Maybe some others out in the audience do. But Place Matters is the organization that I would look to for an app for collecting things. Okay, Ellen wants to know, what are the best resources for planners to research and present the cost of developing these apps? Or do planners need to find an app developer and talk directly to them? So the best advice that I would have about finding an app developer is to find an app that's very similar to what you want to actually achieve. So for example, if you're looking for an app like the Open Tree Map, or you're looking for a 311 type of app, or whatever it is that you're looking for, you can find developers that have already developed more or less what you're looking for, and you just want to be able to customize something to suit your own purposes. If you do that, you'll be able to get an app developed at a relatively low cost. This can, but the app development can be anywhere from, say, $5,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars if you needed an app completely developed from scratch with a high degree of specificity. But that would be the best way, is just to find developers that have already done something like what you want and then talk to them, and then they would be able to help you in figuring out what it might cost to do something like you're looking for. Dustin has asked, do you know of any grant fundings for small rural communities and municipalities to cover the data entry that many of these apps require? The answer is I don't know of any grant funding sources, but many app projects have been grant funded, in that a number of organizations have gotten together, agreed that this is a priority, and have pulled together the funding to help support something like that. I think the key question for the donor community would be, are you developing something from scratch that would have wide applicability, for example, across rural communities, versus are you trying to develop an app that's very specific to do one very specific thing? So I know that's not a great easy to answer, and I'd have to do more research to look into what are some of the funding sources that different apps have been developed under. Okay, how do I keep up with and hear about all the new apps? That's Julie's question. The better question is how you can keep up with all the new apps that are out there. Probably the easiest way to do that is just follow me on Twitter. So I am at Evans-Cowley is my Twitter handle. And what I do is that I have a well-choreographed Twitter feed that keeps me up to date on everything that's happening with technology, particularly as it applies to cities and planning and urban kinds of issues. And anytime I see something that I think is of interest to the planner community that's related to technology, then I will send out a tweet, and that's a pretty easy way to keep up. And then I do this presentation once a year, and that's another way to keep up on an annual basis with the latest things that have come out. Okay, based on my exploration, what's the most versatile phone model brand available? I don't have an answer for that one. I would say that the phone that you pick is really based on your own needs and the phone plan. You know, we have seen an increasing degree to which application developers can develop to specific platforms. More and more apps are being developed across platforms. The iPhone right now has the most apps that are out there, but that's not to say that you shouldn't buy an Android. There are plenty of Android apps out there. And so I have no comment on which phone to buy and which one would work best for you. Okay, Tiana wants to know, for crowdsourcing apps, is there any discussion on where low-income inner-city areas fit into this type of engagement, given their smartphone use among residents is lower on average? So I would disagree with the lower on average piece of it, that we do see significant smartphone use among residents. The question, though, is what their data plan looks like and the degree to which they're using their data plan. So I think that's a good question, and frankly there aren't that many crowdsourcing apps that are out there, and I think that's something we'll see more development on. I also think that we'll see the cost of data come down in terms of the service providers, and that data should become more affordable over the next couple of years, which should hopefully alleviate some of the cost burden associated with what we're paying. But the cost of you know, the mobile phone data plan, when you compare that to what many households are paying for their data plan for internet in their home, it is reasonable for people to be able to accommodate some form of data via their smartphone if they're not paying for it in their home phone. That's not to say that this isn't a significant issue that needs to be followed, but the key message that I would send is that if we're putting lots of stuff on our web pages and we're expecting people to get information that way, we need to recognize that we have a fairly significant audience that is not obtaining their internet information via are traditional websites, that they're obtaining it via their smartphone. And so how we're packaging and delivering information, you're not going to read a 100-page plan via your smartphone, for example. So what are the ways that we can package for a small screen and share information easily? So that would be a challenge I would give to you as planners, is to think about how do we package for a mobile audience instead of what we have done in the past. Matthew shares Google Plus has Hangout, which is a video feed to one of your circles. That's true. So earlier someone had asked about a FaceTime type app, and that's true. You can form a Hangout, which allows you to bring multiple people together to share information in a video format. So that would probably be a good example of that. Oh, Tom Sanchez, my colleague that is teaching technicity with me, he mentioned that they have apps for bike sharing programs in Washington, D.C. So you can see where the closest bike sharing station is and how many bikes are there if you're interested in using that. And they also have information on paying for parking. So that's available in the D.C. area. I'm not sure the exact name of that app, but I bet we can find it through Bike Share in D.C. Okay, let's see. Is it possible to see what other people are posting during a webinar? And the answer is no, we don't release the questions to everybody, but I am collecting some of the things that we're talking about, and I will be adding this to the blog post so that we can share some of the things that, the great ideas that people have come up with. Okay, so Neil says, thank you for mentioning transit schedule apps. It's important to let people know that transit systems need to create Google General Transit Feed specification data in order for developers to easily create apps for their transit systems. This is absolutely true, and so it's why some transit systems have great apps that you can easily find the schedule and other kinds of information, and others don't. And in part of it, it's this open data protocols. So in this case, the General Transit Feed specifications. So thanks, Neil, for mentioning that. Patricia asked, do I have any stats on the use of the Columbus Walking Tours app? And the answer is no, I don't, but I would be curious about downloads and usage. One of the challenges of probably getting that is that I could probably find out how many people have downloaded the general Columbus app, but because the walking tours and the 311 and all of these other services are bundled up into one app, then I wouldn't be able to figure out how many people are using the walking tours app versus using the other 311 and other kinds of apps. All right. Alyssa mentions that Culture Now in New York City has a walking tour of sorts, and she has a link, and I will share that on the blog post that I'll put together. All right. Oh, and Alyssa also comments that some people use Kickstarter to raise money for apps. So I don't know if any of you have ever used or are familiar with Kickstarter. I have given to a number of causes through Kickstarter. Basically, the idea of this is that you have an idea that you want to fund, and it is going to cost some amount of money, and then you encourage people to donate to this. So, for example, you know, we can discover great projects, or I can start my own project, and then you can invite people to donate. So, for example, this person wants to create a documentary on Bob Hawke, and he's looking for money, and so people have pledged $1,435. The way this works is you have a month to raise the money. And if you aren't successful in meeting your fundraising goal, then nobody is charged and nobody gives anything. But if you meet the fundraising goal, then all of that money goes to funding that project. So it's a fun crowdsourcing way to raise money, and it can be for all kinds of weird stuff, like apparently somebody wants to develop the Dragon's Hoard the card game. You know, people have used it for all kinds of purposes, helping a business. We can donate to NanoLight, the world's most energy efficient light bulb. That one's raised $108,000 so far. So this is a way that some people have been raising money for apps. Oh, and Hadrian reports that the Federal Highway Administration has planning funds for congestion apps. So if your community was interested in developing a congestion app, then there is funding out there for that. So that's great information. Okay. And Dustin wants to know, what kind of privacy issues are there with releasing homeowner information, thinking about marketers and surveillance? So think about what's already in the public domain. So for example, if I go to my county auditor's webpage, then you can very easily enter my address or look on a map and find out that I'm the owner of my home. So I think that anything that is public can be used in an app, and somebody may have already used that to develop an app. You know, Zillow gets some of its information from recent home sales and other things. So there's all kinds of information that's out there that people don't necessarily realize is out there. I think the privacy issues are the same as what we would do in our own public office. We release information that's public. We don't release information that's confidential. Rick has shared that All Sport GPS from Timble allows users to record trips in detail and upload data. So I will be sure to share All Sport GPS. Okay. All right, so Rocky wants to share, I believe the next step in public input is online via Facebook, Twitter, apps. Are there any apps that can help gather public input on comprehensive plans, etc.? The answer is yes, there are ways that you can gather all kinds of information that's out there. Some of them, so one of the questions I get a lot of inquiry about is the difference between what we might consider web apps and what we would consider mobile apps. And I think there's going to be a graying of the lines. So right now you download the app from the App Store and it's an independent package on your laptop. But then we have web-enabled or mobile device-enabled websites. So I'll just take, for example, many of you may be familiar with mindmixer.com. This is an example of a public engagement tool, and I'll just scroll down here and we can look at Envision Sacramento. Okay, Envision Sacramento is a planning process that's underway, and this is a mobile-ready website. So if I pull this up via mobile device using the internet application, then I will get a mobile-friendly version of this website. And so we have lots of different websites that have been developed so that they're mobile-ready, or kind of a web app type of format, so that you could very easily view it on your mobile device, versus actual apps. So part of the question is, what's more appropriate for your particular purpose? Is it that you just need people to be able to view it from a website on their mobile device? Or do you need that package of information in a bundle to be able to use it? So for example, my GIS Pro app that I used and I talked about earlier, that's never going to work as a website, right? It's just too data intensive and it needs to be an independent app. But, for example, I talked about the Bay Bridge Viewer, or Bay Bridge Explorer, where it was the flyover and view through. Well, that's great as an app, but I don't know that it had to be an app. It could have been a mobile website. Some of the benefits of a mobile app is that it downloads everything for you, and so you're not waiting on a website and depending on your web connectivity to pull that information up slowly, and it more tightly packages things. But I would just say that Both are great, and it really just depends on what your needs are. Okay. I'm scrolling through, and we have all kinds of people who are saying thank yous and sharing that they've been introduced to different apps and projects. We did talk about open space and parks related apps. I haven't done, Jean asked about this, I haven't done a ton of research looking into the parks apps per se. I'm sure that there are more out there than just the OpenTreeMap one that I mentioned or the one that Boston's developing now. But I think you could certainly look in the App Store for more parks apps. So Andrew wants to know, is there someone working specifically on a standard data format for zoning? We'd love to know who, if anyone, is working on that. And I don't have an answer on that, but I know that there are user groups that are out there that are working on open data protocols. And so if you did some Google searches around open data protocols, then it might provide some further information on how to package some of that information. That's not an area that I've done a ton of research on, but something that I think is helpful. So we are now at 2:29. Can you believe our hour and a half just flew by like that? Seems like we have a lot of people that are excited about mobile technology and ways that we can use that to support planning. You will receive a survey when you exit. I would appreciate if you fill that out. That feedback's super helpful to me as I work on future presentations. In about an hour, you will have an email that will go out via GoToWebinar that will include a link to the blog post. That is a work in progress. I started working on it right before we had this event, and I've got a lot of things that I want to add to it now that we've had our session and some of the information sharing that has been going on. So I appreciate your time and attention and all the sharing that you've been doing. You can tell I'm incredibly excited and passionate about technology and planning. I hope to see some of you in the Technicity course, and look forward to being able to share more with you on Twitter or via my blog. So thanks so much for your attention today.
All right, thank you for the great presentation.